Alright guys, let's hop into it. This is going to be the endgame variant of the Eye of Winter build. You can see we are still able to shred T15 bosses on maps with ease, and the greatest part is this is incredibly budget friendly. I'm talking about 2 to 3 divines will get you this build up and running because, well, it's not lightning, so it's not considered very sought after for the pieces of gear. It's kind of like a hidden gem, I would say, as any cold based build is really good for beginners because a lot of the stuff is super cheap because there's not that many people playing them. Obviously, making this video will make things maybe go up in price, but for the most part, there isn't anything that you really need for the build that is a unique, that is expensive, with the exception of Snake Pit, which isn't really that expensive. It's about 20 exalted orbs at the time of me making this video, but this is the only unique that is going to be build enabling. Now, do you have to have this to make the build play? Technically no, but it's going to significantly increase your speed at clearing. So for starters, let's go over the gems, we'll go over the gear and everything. So keep in mind, the point of this is supposed to be to allow you to get to endgame within a budget of 2 to 3 divines. That is the goal of this. Obviously, yes, you can invest way more and get a way stronger build, but I try to make my build guides achievable for most people, so it's going to be easier to achieve. Because if you look at the prices on certain things, like if you were to look at like a +5 to all cold, you can get it for like 5, 6, like you can get these for under 10 exalts super easy, even with extra cast speed, which is something that is pretty dang expensive. If you were to look at any wands that are +2 lightning levels, the minimum is like 2 divines. So the prices between this build and like the meta, which is kind of what most people are playing, it's night and day in terms of price. Now, as far as your performance goes, it's not like you're really lacking in performance, and that is because Eye of Winter hits a lot of times and you're gonna get a lot of crit out of it. So the whole point of this build is kind of to facilitate the fantasy of like a frozen orb sorceress in Diablo 2. It was one of my favorite things, and I really wanted to go ahead and make an update for you guys that really enjoyed this build. Keep in mind, you cannot level with this build as level 1. I will have a leveling guide. You can play Spark, you can play Frost Bomb. Those are all great skills for leveling, but you cannot start off with Eye of Winter. You need to be level 52 to actually equip it. But anyways, let's go ahead and go over the build and the update as we've made some adjustments and changes for the end game. Again, you're able to do T15 super smooth with this build. Just as a heads up, it is energy shield based, so don't expect to like walk into a giant pack and get like a bunch of recovery. You can get some stuff with Grim Feast, but again, energy shield builds compared to, let's say, other builds that can be within melee range, you sometimes need to wait for that shield to either recharge or you need to collect the Grim Feast. So don't try to face tank with this build. That is important. Even though most of the time things are frozen, with Path of Exile, there's just a lot of explosions. So I just want to warn you guys, if you maybe came from like my Ranger build, which I honestly was kind of face tanking most of the stuff, with this though, you do need to watch your shield. If your shield is like low and you're constantly taking damage, well, you're going to eat into your HP and you don't really have as much HP because it's a heavily energy shield based build. So anyways, let's go over the skills. So we run Eye of Winter. It's going to apply critical weakness, so we get more crit. We run Leverage, more crit against the immobilized enemies. Freeze counts as an immobilized, that's why we went Eye of Winter. And then Cold Master for more damage, and this is essentially how we scale Eye of Winter. I had a couple people ask me, hey, I tried Eye of Winter, it sucks. What are you doing different with your build? All I'm doing, my friend, is just getting as many points into the levels as possible. This is how you get your big damage on a lot of the things in Path of Exile 2. Levels are important. They've always said that they were heavily inspired by D2, and in D2, levels mattered. You can see the current gameplay is level 30, but don't worry, it's really easy to achieve. It doesn't require a level 20 gem or like a corruption. You can get this really easy. Most of the stuff is just kind of given to you on the gear. And like I said, it is incredibly cheap. So yeah, you want as much levels as possible. If I had another gem slot, Inspiration is fantastic. You can also throw in any other source of additional damage. That's fine too. Frost Bomb, I like it to apply the exposure for cold exposure. It's just one of the best DPS skills. You can run Cold Pen, Elemental Focus. Doesn't really matter. It's great. And then Archmage, this is a big source of her damage. Surprisingly, half of the damage actually comes from Archmage. It's one of the most OP things. It kind of carries every single Sorceress build pretty much at this point. Until it gets nerfed, everybody's going to be playing it. And then just +1 level because it gives you 0.05 extra resource cost reduction. And then Grim Feast, this allows us to kind of Shang Tsung collect the souls. You can see our energy shield's at 7,000, which is massive. Like, this is how we are tanky, so to speak. But again, don't try to face tank everything because Undeath Explosions still hit really hard. And also, to mention, you can invest in a stun threshold if you want to play more like YOLO go in, but just realize that energy shield builds, unless you get a lot of stun threshold, you may want to equip just a charm just to facilitate the stun kind of immunity, or invest into the points into your stun threshold is based off of energy shield. Otherwise, you can get perma stunned. I've learned that the hard way in PoE too, especially if you want to try mind over matter in the build as well. Anyways, next up, hypothermia. We're running this. We're running the support gems over here, Persistence, Heightened Curse, and Hex Bloom, just for extra, like, damage, basically. I only really cast, like, the Flame Wall, Hypothermia, Frostbomb on elites, but it's just kind of fun to push the buttons, and I like this build. Flame Wall adds a significant amount of damage as well. Again, if I'm in a boss, I'll activate Flame Wall, but we activate Flame Wall, Magnified Effect, Expanse, Spell Cascade, and Fire Mastery. It just gives us that ability to kind of, like, freeze, shock, ignite. You get, like, kind of everything in here, because Archmage does lightning damage. Ignite doesn't really help, but it's another ailment technically, and if you want to scale like damage into like while the target is affected by ailment, hey, go for it too. Really fun stuff, and I just kind of like this whole idea of the build. Really fun stuff. And then as far as the gear goes, let's go ahead and hop into that. So pretty much we're just looking for like cold damage, level of all cold spells. Cast speed is excellent. That will actually make things cost a lot. The difference between like a 5 exalt and like a 20 exalted wand is just pretty much the cast speed. Again, cold is super cheap right now because again, no one's really playing it. I feel like it's actually pretty decent. I've actually opted not to go into Chaos Inoculation yet. That will require like a lot more investment, and I would say if you want to go in the higher end stuff, go for it, but still getting Chaos Res, even getting life is totally fine, but resistances, energy shield in all your places, cold damage, spell damage is all great. Heck, you can get lightning damage, fire damage, all of the damage scales, which is really awesome because it's beginner friendly here. Then we run in the amulet slot over here. You can get spirit in your amulet or your chest piece, doesn't really matter, whatever is going to facilitate those numbers to be able to activate Grim Feast is all you really need, so you don't need to get a high roll in spirit. Obviously, I'm going to show the highest one because it makes more sense here. But extra mana regen is good, or you can get mana shield like recharge rate. That's another thing that you can throw in to make it even better for your chest piece. But if you really are suffering in the mana department, definitely try to get it, because the build, as you start going up in levels of the gems, it does start to cost a lot more. And then we're running just energy shield, maximum mana, resistances. Anywhere that you can get mana is good because it's extra damage for our build. Also, it just kind of helps facilitate all of the extra casts of just spamming your stuff. For the charms, this is actually something important. Usually I'm like, whatever, the charm doesn't matter, pick the one that you want. Stone charm is going to be really helpful here because we don't take any of the nodes. It is optional. If you want to take it, that's fine, but just realize that you're going to have to invest like 3 or 4 points into it to make it a little bit more viable. Just get seething for the life flask. For the mana flask, it doesn't really matter. You don't need the instant recovery, by the way, on mana. You can run the one that removes some of your HP and just gives you more of it. And then as far as the tree goes, let's go make this a little bit larger so you guys can see it here, just in case, you know, shout out to my mobile viewers. So for the very start of the beginning, if you want to take more damage, or if you need the extra regen, that's totally fine. I ended up going for the energy shield because I felt like the damage was good. In fact, I was thinking about like removing some of the damage for even crazier survivability, because the point of this was like super beginner friendly, super budget. So it doesn't really matter too much in the starter area. But one update that I want to give you guys for the Ascendancy, the first thing that you want to get is Force of Will. This is like the 100% you want this. If you want to get Shaper Storm Strike twice, this is totally fine. You can still apply the shock. You get 20% value, but it's ×2 if you do get this. If you want to get like shock magnifications, hey, be my guest. I don't think that's a bad stat at all, because you get basically double of it. If you want more survivability, you can actually take Heart of Storm. Damage recoup in PoE 2 is a little bit worse. It gives you the duration of like over 8 seconds. It's up to you. If you want to take this, it's not that bad. And then if you want to take the exposure, that's fine. Like, there's just so many options. Take whatever you want. Just note with Tempest Caller, if you start like stacking a bunch of stuff, this will like eat into your mana, so you will have to get more mana regen. But you can have the little storms apply other ailments, and it can actually give you even more damage. Again, it just kind of becomes like, if you've ever played any cast on crit builds where like mana just becomes kind of an annoyance, like you're just out of mana constantly. So take that with a grain of salt. If you do want to go and play this, it will give you objectively probably the highest amount of DPS, especially since you can socket in a bunch of things in it. But as far as the skill tree goes, it's relatively similar, but we will heavily be scaling more into crit, as we will have essentially more crit in the build. So we go over here, again, at the start, if you want to get the spell damage, that's totally fine. We get all the cold and the freeze build up, we get all this extra damage here, we get the extra energy shield, we get the extra crit, and then we get all this mana recovery. Once you start scaling those gem skills, it's going to cost a crazy amount. I think ours is like like at 500 and something mana every single cast, but you get so much mana regen in this build, it really helps out. We can take this over here for more energy shield, and all the jewels. Check the description in the pin for the planner. It'll show you all the jewel sockets, things that you want. You want percent mana recovery on kill in the earlier stages, but later on, mana regen I felt like was much better, so you can actually save yourself some exalts on this, because those can be about like 20, depending on, if you want a good one, a good jewel can cost you like 20, but you can definitely snipe some of the ones that are like plus minions and just like the mana on kill that would just give you 2%, and the rest of the stats are pretty garbage. I had a lot of those as well while I was leveling, but eventually you could swap out of the mana on kill. There's a couple of really good anointments that you can throw in. There's one that gives you over here that gives you reduction of mana cost. There's like one of the little distilled is like 8x, and then the rest are like 1-1, so it's a pretty cheap one, so it's like 10. But there's a very expensive one that I would like to get, but again, it's a budget build, so I'm not going to include it. But mental toughness is fantastic if you can, if you want to make this more of a non-budget build. But again, I want to keep this one budget over here, and then we're just getting all of the jewel sockets. You can get really good jewels now for like under 5 exalts. You could definitely get a jewel that will give you so much. You can get cold damage, crit, spell damage. You can get energy shield from your focus. Like, you get so many good stats. Again, we're stacking lots of mana. Mana equals damage in our build because, well, the surge is pretty OP. And then we're getting all of this. The most important thing is like the plus rank to skills. Honestly, I actually considered dropping like all of the cold, and you could just get all elemental damage, because theoretically the build hits for everything. And the cool thing with this, because I want to make it budget friendly, that means all of your gear you can get fire, cold, and lightning damage, and they all actually matter, which is a kind of a cool thing, because sometimes you may come across a monster that is like kind of like heavily got resistances on one type, and then you don't have to worry about it. But if you want to, you can get all of the pen on cold and kind of make it more of a cold based build. But you know, flame wall is just like one small little activation, and it does give you pretty good bang for your buck, considering there's so many projectiles that do shoot out, and each one of them gets basically essentially the flat damage is almost like half of it. It's actually amazing how much damage that you can get. Plus, on top of that, you get your cold damage as extra fire damage against frozen enemies. And again, from the gameplay that you guys are seeing, like pretty much everything is frozen. Even once we come across the boss is, the first freeze is like, it's like Diablo when you build the Stagger Bar. The first one is like you instantly hit it, and if you can out DPS it, then I guess you don't really need as much survivability. But if you want more survivability, there are some nodes like over here that are fantastic, that'll give you a lot more energy shield. And this is the thing I was talking about, that stun threshold from energy shield. If you want to go this route, it's not that bad at all. I wouldn't get the recoup over here, but like getting +1 to maximum elemental resistance is fantastic. Good stuff indeed. And then there's tons of extra like energy shield if you want to type it in. If you want to make the build a little bit more tanky, feel free to go and do so. But I gotta stress this with any energy shield based build, because I know a lot of you guys maybe followed my rogue build, where like I'm just like, dude, I kill everything so fast it doesn't matter. The thing with this build is you can face tank, but you can only face tank for a set duration. Once the energy shield starts to deplete, you need to not take damage. My best suggestion would be, if you've ever played Call of Duty or Halo, you have to not take damage for a set duration, and then it'll start to regen. There is a implicit that you can get on a chest piece that will give you 50% faster start of energy shield regeneration, where it starts, it'll take less time because it takes a couple seconds for it to like register. But if you want it to go up faster, essentially like the starting time to go up faster, then you need to invest either points into that or get the chest piece. But there's also the recovery rate of your energy shield, so it's almost like two different things. But with Grim Feast, it kind of alleviates that. And again, even if you take a big chunk in a hit, if you start collecting the souls, you'll start to see, like if we kind of fast forward some of the gameplay over here, you'll see that like I'll have a bunch. You basically get to overflow your energy shield, almost giving you double the amount in a lot of the cases before you fight the boss. And then when you fight the boss, you could pretty much just stand still. And with the most part, there are maybe pinnacle bosses where you can't really face tank things, so just keep that in mind. But for the most part, most people just want to do T15 maps, and this is a great build for a budget player because it's fun, and on top of that, it's got relatively good survivability, and the most important part, it is cheap. So everyone can make this build, which is essentially my goal as a content creator with build guides, unless I'm trying to show you guys some sort of meme or crazier thing. But just make sure that you do invest a little bit into getting some mana regen on a couple of pieces of gear. Now, what's the like special number? I can't tell you. I can tell you though, right now I have it 600. I could easily gain some level levels. I believe this is like level 84, 85 gameplay here. But if I was to gain another few levels, like another 10 levels with this build scales really, really well. And the reason why this build scales really well is the more mana that you have, the more damage that you get. And on top of that, just like any other like build, getting those levels up on gems is definitely going to be key. So if you ever feel like any build, this doesn't apply just to like Eye of Winter, but if you're feeling that any of the builds are kind of lacking in terms of damage, it really comes down to getting your gem ups, and then also trying to get upgrades here and there. With attack-based builds, you can get a lot more damage via your gear. That is like numerical, where it's like physical damage, cold damage added to attacks. But on a lot of the spell stuff, it's a lot of cast speed. Cast speed is definitely going to be king in a lot of situations, because remember, every single one of your attacks with the Eye of Winter, you're getting all of that Archmage, you're getting all of the Flame Ball like bonuses, and you just want to just start spamming them as quickly as possible. So your big DPS boost with casting is definitely going to be cast speed in terms of your gear, which will be on your rings. Another quick thing to mention with this ring over here with Snake Pit, again, you're just basically getting like maximum mana or energy shield on all your pieces of gear. But the most important thing I have to stress, when you have Snake Pit, it must, I repeat this, it must be on your right ring slot. It does something completely different on the left ring. We don't want that. We want the little icicles to bounce on one target, then bounce to another. That's the reason why we play Snake Pit. It's chain without any of the, normally chain is like a 50% damage reduction, but it does not have that. And it also is really good because it has cast speed 2 times, because it's implicit, well, it has cast speed. So yeah, really, really awesome ring over there, specifically because of cast speed. But again, it's that chain that we want, and it has to be in the right ring slot in order for that to go live. But anyways, that's the build. Have some fun with it, guys. Let me know what you think. If there's any ways to improve it, let me know, and I'll be updating my final guide maybe later down the line with this build. If you want to go Chaos Inoculation or Mind Over Matter, that is optional with the build. You can even consider running Eldritch Battery, but keep in mind then your stun threshold becomes pretty terrible if you do that. But it is another way if you want to go ahead and experiment and have a little bit of fun. But yeah, really awesome build. I feel like it's pretty much done at this point. Like once you're able to do T15 maps pretty smoothly, I kind of consider that's where most people want to be able to like do, you know, with the builds, especially if it's a budget-friendly build. You know, when you can kill bosses within like, you know, 10 seconds, I'd say it's still a pretty solid build. Anyway, so that's going to go ahead and wrap it up. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. If you do, hit subscribe, turn the bell if you'd like to see more content in the future, and everything will be pinned down below. If there is any updates, I'll let you guys know via just changing and updating the planner on Mobalytics. Anyways, take care, peace out. Or if you're watching this on TikTok, it'll be the link in the bio.